This short video is designed to help you think through your assignment for the Empire module, Advanced Topic in Christian Ethics or Jesus and Mission in the Shadow of Empire. The assignment, just to remind you, is this. In relation to one of the themes of imperialism discussed in class, or another, as agreed with the tutor, write an analysis of the interaction between that theme and your context, and reflect critically on the possible implications for the ethical practice of your church, organisation or community group. I'll unpack that in different stages. So you need to choose one of the imperial themes to explore. We looked at economics, and in the Roman context that was also related to militarism, as it was explained that it was a racket like the mafia backed up by the army. Or we looked in our contemporary context to the idolatrous theology of the market myths, the question of moral oblivion that we're led into as the market encourages us to be oblivious to various realities, and the alternatives that are offered to us. Or we looked at a second theme, patterns of domination. In the Roman context, to do with slavery and gender. Or contemporary context, there are various ways we can take this, such as racism, the models of adults and children, or how humans use the earth. And there are other things as well that could come there. The third theme was to do with civilization and uncivilization. In the Roman context, we looked at barbarians and the impure, and we focused in the contemporary context on what it means to engage in uncivilized religion. So the themes are the titles there, but you should choose an issue within one of those titles that can interact with your context. And the Jesus-Roman context may well inform your analysis of that interaction between your context and the theme. Still not clear, so let's go to the next slide to see if this helps. So you're choosing something within one of these themes, which are very broad, so it gives you lots of scope to think in lots of different creative directions. Something economic, something dominating, something uncivilized. Then to do with your context, and again that can function at many different sorts of levels. Something very local, your church or community group or community, or it could be a wider context, a national phenomenon to do with debates about gender or sexuality or ethnicity, or it could be a global phenomenon to do with poverty or a different kind of justice or the exploitation of the earth. So you choose a theme, broadly some sort of topic, you choose something to do with your context, and so how that topic, how that theme is affecting your context. And then what's the implications that you're going to draw out in terms of ethical practice, in terms of missional response that's groundable in your context, in your church or in your community group. There's the three dimensions of the essay. Something within one of those themes, something to do with your context, and the ethical response. What I'm going to offer on these next two slides are just two different methodologies which you may find helpful. Some people have found them helpful, sometimes people haven't found them, haven't particularly used them, but they're still a sort of helpful reference point, or you can find another methodology to help you shape and frame your essay. So this is one from Myers in his book, Who Will Roll Away the Stone? It's a four-stage methodology. The first is to start with the text of an experience. He calls each of these stages texts, but he means them in quite different sorts of ways. So what is the story? What is the text? What is the story of an experience? Start with, the starting point is some sort of socio-political reality. What's going on the ground? What's happening? What's the experience? What's the instance of where there is hurt in the world? What's the thing that sparks your interest in analysing it from an imperial perspective? So what's the story? Secondly, he says the life text. So start to locate it in a bigger story. So you've got a particular instance of an issue. How does that now relate to the bigger web of things going on? To deconstruct it So you identify that it's part of a whole web of connections. This is where you might bring in empire sort of language, and then having assessed it and analysed it in a bigger framework, you then start to say, so now I've got a better grasp of what's going on, how can we deconstruct to offer the possibility of transforming it? C is where the theological text is brought to bear. What does our faith say about this? As we've been exploring in this module, in a way, B and C are so closely related, you can't separate out too neatly first the empire framework and then a theological response. Those two things are in themselves affecting each other, because the theological response is in itself affected by empire, and theology is present in empire. But even so, separating them out to some extent may help, at least, to frame that you're doing slightly different things. In B, you're identifying how an issue is part of a bigger framework. In C, you're identifying how our faith responds to that framework. And then in D, you're doing what he calls dislocation. That is how you're kind of nudging, how you're rubbing up against the situation in order to change it. What is the response? What's the ethical response here? How are you going to unsettle the status quo as it currently is to change the story? He also emphasises that at each stage you need to have something like a thick description. So it's not a superficial sort of description of things, but getting under the skin of things a little bit more deeply, and opening up the possibility of imaginative leaps, because this isn't a neat process from one stage to the other. It might be a bit messy and things are overlapping. So it gives you scope for being creative in the leaps you might make that still need to be explained, but still some sort of creativity is fine. So if we would put that in the terms of the three things I identified on the previous slide, A would be the imperial theme in a context. What's the issue going on here? B would be analysing it in terms of the imperial lens, broadening out to see how it's part of a bigger matrix of issues. C would be bringing theological resources to bear, back and forth between the stages. And D would be asking, what now? What's the action? What's the ethical response to this issue? So that's Myers. It may be helpful. Some people find it helpful, some less so. Now here's another one. See if this one helps you in a different way. Leonardo Boff, in Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor, offers another four-stage process. Moment one, he calls, start with the cry of the oppressed. So where is there hurt? Where is there a cry? And honour that reality. Tell the story as faithfully, authentically as possible. Where is there an issue of oppression, of struggle, of injustice, of harshness? Moment two is about is in itself a two-stage process in a sense. First of all, making analytical judgments about it, which is about critical knowledge, drawing on other disciplines, broadening the picture, bringing the imperial framework in all its richness to bear, and then also what he calls hermeneutic mediation, a fancy way for talking about what does your faith have to say about this, what's your interpretation, your hermeneutic, how does it mediate between the reality and what could be, what is and what should be. And then moment three, transformation, action. How are you going to transform the situation, this story, this reality? What's your ethical response to it? And then fourthly, what might it look like to celebrate that the changes have happened? Interesting that he adds celebration there as part of the process. So moment one, honouring the reality of the struggle, of the oppression. Number two, analysing it and bringing your faith to bear on it. Number three, transformation. And number four, celebration. So if we relate that to the structure identified at the beginning, number one is to do with the imperial theme in context, something to do with economy, something to do with domination, something to do with uncivilization in a particular context. assess it in terms of empire, and draw on theological resources. These are interwoven, as I was saying. Then draw out the implications, the response, and then might this lead to some sort of celebration. So that's the second methodology, in a sense quite similarly structured to the one before, but the different language might resonate for different people. Or you might find another approach, another way of structuring to frame how you're going about this. You can think creatively about it, and we can discuss things when we meet together. Hope at least this stimulates your thinking. See you soon.